Welcome back to Spiritual Awakening Radio on HealthyLife.net. I'm James Bean. It's my pleasure being with you every week at this time on HealthyLife.net, exploring the world of spirituality, comparative religion, and books. I began this segment with some Syriac Aramaic chant. It sounds very Jewish, doesn't it? Or Arabic, or Muslim, Middle Eastern. Very Jewish, I would say. What it is Syriac, which is a dialect of the Aramaic language, a very ancient sound indeed, coming from a recording I have of Antioch liturgy from the Syrian Orthodox Church. These are the great-grandchildren of the Apostle Thomas, the Church of the Light, the Church of the East, with roots in the Aramaic language and in a region of the world known as Mesopotamia, modern-day Syria, southern Turkey, and Iraq, around the Persian Gulf. This is the location. Actually, there are many Syrian Christians in India these days as well, so this quite literally is the Church of the East, with Aramaic Syriac roots. Before the break, I started to talk about the light motif, how there is this vast body of literature written in Syriac Aramaic by mystics who lived between the 3rd and the 8th century, actually afterwards too, although today's guest has translated writings from that period, the 3rd through the 8th century primarily. There is this vast collection of literature, and it has a very strong light motif. The view that God is light, is an uncreated divine light, an eternal light, and that contemplative mystics given to silence and prayer or meditation, contemplation, may see this divine light, may have a vision of the divine light, and through the contemplation of divine light become one with the Supreme Being. This process is known in some traditions as theosis, or divinization, becoming one with God. Many of the Syriac mystics were light mystics, such as Isaac of Nineveh, also John of Deliatha. This is a quote from a new book published by Gorgias Press, The Letters of John of Deliatha, translated by Mary Hansberry, published by Gorgias Press, GorgiasPress.com, is the publisher. John of Deliatha. Better than this is that person who seeks his life within himself. All the worlds may be full of life, but if he is empty of it, what profit from what is outside? And if he is full of life, what harm can death do to him from the outside? So then, look at God within yourself, how God is light. For his nature is a glorious, many-splendored light. He manifests the light of his nature to those who love him in all the worlds. That is his glory. And he changes the image of those who see it to the likeness of his glory. Look within and see him in your being. Look within and see him in your being, united to you as fire to iron within the furnace, and as moisture in your body. An example of a glorious passage from the Syriac mystics, in this case John of Deliatha, from a new book called The Letters of John of Deliatha, translated by Mary Hansberry, published by Gorgias Press, providing an excellent example of what I mean by the light motif, the light mysticism, a form of mysticism where it is believed that we can see divine light and be transformed by the light. St. Isaac of Nineveh was another great light mystic in the Syriac tradition of the East. And I want to begin the phone interview today with Sebastian Brock of Oxford, one of the world's leading translators of Syriac Aramaic texts, about St. Isaac of Nineveh. I want to talk about St. Isaac and his influence upon the centuries. Yes, Isaac of Nineveh was one of the great writers of Christianity, one of the most widely read, as I understand it, in the monastic world.
Yes, he's a very important ecumenical figure because he came from a church that was regarded by everyone else as heretical, so-called Nestorian. He's in fact from the Church of the East, that's quite definite, and he was a bishop in that church. And yet his works were translated into Greek in the probably late 8th, 9th century by people from the Greek Orthodox tradition. They kept his name. All that they did was alter some of the offensive names that were unpopular in the Greek tradition, and just substituted acceptable names from quotations and so on. And then from Greek he got into, well, a huge number of different languages. And what's really intriguing is that in the late 20th century and early this century, there's been a large number of new translations of his works into Romanian, Russian, Arabic, various European languages, and even some extracts in Japanese. So he's someone who's very widely read in all sorts of different church traditions. So he breaks down all the ecclesiastical boundaries that have been built up.
And he probably would be pleased with that.
Well, I'm sure he would. And so he's been the inspiration behind the revival of monasticism on Mount Athos in the Greek tradition, and the revival of monasticism in the Coptic tradition. So both in the course of the late 20th century, and both in traditions which historically have disliked the Church of the East. So it's a wonderful irony, which pleases me, that he's able to transcend all these divisions that we've created.
Is part of that because some of his theology is ambiguous, and therefore it's hard for him to be controversial, because some aspects of his beliefs are not known and therefore don't trigger any red flags for anyone? Is that part of it?
There were certain things in his teaching which did trigger red flags, even in his own community, and he was at one point condemned in one of his own church's synods. Yeah. But for the most part, he's writing on the interior life, the spiritual life, and this doesn't touch on any of the controversial, certainly doesn't touch on Christology in the way which would have probably put other people's backs up. Yeah. So the subject matter is what has, as it were, carried him over borders, because it's subject matter of interest to anyone interested in the spiritual life. And he has the ability, I think, of talking to people in the 21st century, which very few writers of that period do. I find him wonderful.
Yes, and in the other Syriac fathers and mystics, in the Syriac fathers on prayer and the spiritual life, I find to be that as well. Their spirituality is very strong, very amazing, and you certainly pick up on that. You know, there's something I think that could be very appealing to people of many different faith communities. Yes. From that wonderful collection of mystical texts. And yes. I've tried to find other Syriac father-like writings. There's the ascetical homilies of St. Isaac that was published a few years back.
That's a beautiful collection and beautifully translated.
Yeah.
It's pity it's out of print at the moment.
It's out of print, and
I gather.
And I do have your book, The Wisdom of St. Isaac.
That's a small collection of very short sayings.
Yeah.
Which are often very penetrating. I enjoyed collecting those for that volume. I did another volume of at least I provided the translations for a friend of mine called Donald Olchin, who writes quite a lot on, well, all sorts of different things. But he wanted to put a little anthology of slightly longer texts of St. Ephrem, and that was published 20 years ago. It's called The Heart of Love, or the Heart of Compassion, that's right, The Heart of Compassion. And unfortunately, that too is out of print. It was translated, that was the work translated into Japanese.
And there is a book, I think now, on John the Elder.
Yes.
I forget the author's name, Mary
Hansberry.
Yeah.
Yes, in fact, I saw her last night.
Oh, okay. Well,
it's a good friend.
It's an intriguing book, and I plan on reviewing that. And
that's his letters, his spiritual letters, and he's someone who clearly experienced all sorts of amazing mystical experiences, and he describes these in the letters in a very direct way, a way that you very rarely find in mystics.
That's what I find very appealing about the Syriac Fathers. Joseph the Visionary, there's a section in that part of the book describing his own visionary experience of what some might call the uncreated light of the Holy Trinity.
Yes, that's right. Yes. Yes, they seem to be less sort of, well, I don't know what to say, cautious about describing these things, because sometimes you find that mystics are very unwilling to, or unable perhaps, to try and describe their experiences, which are really beyond words. But I think John is someone who is so overwhelmed with the wonder of his experiences that he wanted to communicate them to his friends who probably had similar experiences. So these are, as it were, private letters now made very public.
Ah. Well, I certainly find that to be incredibly valuable whenever that becomes something that you can study. Certain light mystics, their works are available. Of course, St. Isaac, I guess, would be in that category of a light mystic. Simeon, the new theologian,
is another wonderful person.
Yeah. And most of the Syriac Fathers seem to fall into that category.
Yes, I think that's right. Yes.
Well, we're coming up on a break. After the break, we'll continue this conversation about the mysterious writings found in monasteries in the Syriac tradition. Then later on, more on the light mysticism of the Syriac Fathers. You're hearing Spiritual Awakening on HealthyLife.net. Welcome back to Spiritual Awakening Radio on HealthyLife.net. I'm James Bean. It's great being with you here every week, exploring the world of spirituality, comparative religion, and books. My guest this week is Sebastian Brock of Oxford, who is one of the world's leading scholars of Syriac Aramaic studies, teaches, researches, and has translated some amazing texts from Syriac, Aramaic, saints and mystics of the East. The Syrian Orthodox Church, the Syriac tradition, goes from Syria, Mesopotamia, Iraq, all the way to India, and has a vast treasure trove of spiritual literature, a rich spiritual heritage. Some amazing things are starting to appear in the English language for the first time, so it's great having Sebastian Brock as my guest on this week's Spiritual Awakening. Are there monasteries in Syria or that Mesopotamia area? Are there ancient monasteries there as well? Still?
Oh, yes. Well, there are several in Iraq, but one doesn't know what their fate is. And the Episcopal Library is a very important one in Baghdad. Heaven knows what's happened to it. The Chaldean Patriarchate has apparently a very large library which has never been catalogued. or it has actually been catalogued, but the catalogue got destroyed in an earlier revolution. So all these things are terribly fragile, and I once saw a statistic that more manuscripts have been destroyed in the 20th century than in, say, 5 centuries previous to that, through war and so on.
Wow.
And it's horrifying, and we know that quite a lot has been destroyed, not only in the museum, but all in the libraries in Baghdad.
So it must be hard to gain access. It must not be an easy or routine thing.
It's certainly impossible at the moment. But even in better times, it's always difficult to get access to the monastery libraries. And you have to win people's trust, and you need a lot of patience and time.
And I wonder how easy, it might be relatively difficult to get copies of books that could exist but are in an apocryphal category. Like if there was a Syriac edition of the Gospel of Thomas, would anyone feel inclined to share it, or is there a...
Oh, well, I think there'd be no problem.
There wouldn't be a problem?
No. Actually, in that case, I think it's very unlikely that such a thing would ever turn up. I wouldn't have thought there'd be a problem, and there's no sort of censorship around. It's just that probably there'd be no one on the spot who had much understanding of what a document such as that would be, or how interesting it was.
It would be fascinating to discover what books are in the different monasteries, and I'm sure there are many discoveries, many amazing texts that we probably don't even know about.
Oh yes, that's certainly likely. I think there wouldn't be anything as dramatic as, say, the Nag Hammadi finds, of a totally unexpected sort. So who knows? And things are turning up all the time. Just a couple of years ago, these much older documents in Aramaic of the 5th century BC, official documents of the Achaemenid Empire on papyrus, I think it was on papyrus, turned up in Afghanistan. This was a province of the Achaemenid Persian Empire in the 5th century BC, and we have documents from the same empire in Egypt. So right from the two extremes of a huge empire over Western Asia, you've got documents in Aramaic.
That's amazing.
Official documents.
That's amazing. Of course, I guess the earliest synagogue, there's a synagogue that used to exist in the 1st century A.D. in India. So it's surprising how things from the West have been able to travel east.
Oh, yes. Yes, I think the synagogue, I've actually been to the synagogue. It's in Cochin. The present building is actually much more recent. It's from sort of 16th century or something, and its decoration is about the same period. I don't know if there's any firm evidence for the Jewish community there as early as the 1st century AD, but it was an area with which Rome traded, and we know that from the presence of a lot of Roman coins. And the Apostle Thomas, according to local tradition, went there, even the date is provided, in 52 AD. And the presence of Syriac Christianity in South India certainly goes back very early. And it's possible, but totally unprovable, that the Apostle Thomas actually did go there. People did travel a huge amount, and in any case, Syriac Christianity reached South India at a very early date.
As in the late part of the 1st century A.D.?
Well, it could have been as early as that. We don't have any proper documentation until around about 200, just early 3rd century, I think, when there are references to Christians in that area.
I want to share with you some readings about light mysticism found in the Syriac Fathers, the Syriac Mystics of the East, the focus of this week's edition of Spiritual Awakening. The following passages are to be found in a new book called The Letters of John of Deliatha. In this case, not translated by Sebastian Brock, but by another Syriac scholar. Her name is Mary Hansberry. The Letters of John of Deliatha, translated by Mary Hansberry, is a new book published by Gorgias Press, GorgiasPress.com is the website of Gorgias Press, where you can learn more about this book and other books of the Syriac East. This has become one of my favorite books in the category of Christian mysticism, because as Sebastian Brock was saying earlier, John of Deliatha, in this collection of letters, originally private letters, that we now have a chance to peek at, since they've been published worldwide, in these letters he describes some of his own experiences and more freely talks about light mysticism. And this is something that mystics sometimes are quite tight-lipped about. Mystics tend to shy away from talking about their own experiences, or even teachings. Sometimes secret teachings become so secret that they become estranged from the religion that they are originally associated with. They become so secret that eventually nobody knows the secret. That's how secret mystical teachings can get sometimes. They can actually die off in a tradition unless someone shares the secret with others, which is definitely the case with John of Deliatha. Some of these letters also are poetic. They almost remind me of Rumi poetry. From the Letters of John of Deliatha. Sanctify your soul by the remembrance of him. Adorn yourself by gazing on him. Unite yourself with him in the fire of his love. By this he shows himself to you, and gladdens you by the sight of him. This love makes him dwell in your soul with his Father and his Spirit. This love makes you yourself like a vision of his majesty, and on all sides you will see clearly. By this love you will tread upon the depths, and in his light you will behold the highest heavens. This love will enter in you the mysteries of the Spirit, and will reveal to you the uncreated light, and show you how to walk in it. By this love all which is in you will radiantly shine forth, and all which is before you will give great light. This will make you a king instead of a servant, and will put all your enemies under your feet to be tread upon. This will crown your intellect with the crown which is offered at the end of the course, and in the stirrings of your intellect the contemplation of the Holy Trinity will be manifest. Therefore let us put an end to our words at this haven of all the worlds. Quite often in Syriac literature is some sort of description of a stage where prayer is no more, when it is no longer appropriate to use words anymore because you are caught up in wonder and astonishment by the manifestation of the divine light, the light of the Holy Trinity. And so therefore you don't need to pray anymore. You reach a stage in your contemplative practice when you're just gazing at the light, and you don't need, at that point, to do anything else. More from John of Deliatha. Blessed is he from out of himself inhales the fragrance of life in the marvelous revelations of the Father, which appear in him always. Blessed is the one who gazes continually in himself at the vision in the mirror of spiritual beings. Blessed is he who listens within himself and conceals the hidden mysteries of the Spirit. Blessed is the one whose soul speaks with the stirring which is from the Spirit, and whose ordinary thoughts are silenced by the force of his astonishment. Such is the amazement of the one whose mind is stilled from all movements. In the new mystery, he hears simple praise within himself to rejoice with, in the calm silence of his mind and of his tongue. This is the one who has received the tongues of the Spirit from heaven. In the Syriac writings are descriptions of souls spending much time in prayer and stillness, contemplation, what some might describe as meditation. And there is a stage in the darkness when light appears. And when you reach this stage of pure prayer, you are astonished at the light. You are caught up in wonder and simply gaze at the light. You contemplate the light. And you don't need to do anything, say anything. You have reached the end of words and are simply in the light. A couple of readings from the book The Letters of John of Deljatha by Mary Hansberry, published by Gorgias Press. Stay tuned for more spiritual awakening after the break here on HealthyLife.net. Welcome back to Spiritual Awakening Radio on HealthyLife.net. I'm James Bean. My email address is james@spiritualawakeningradio.com. If you'd like to receive my book list of recommended Syriac books, including the ones that I have read from this week or discussed with my guest earlier, who was Sebastian Brock, email me. I'll send you a list. I have a very long list of Syriac books and other recommended books of the Thomas tradition of the East: Gospel of Thomas, Psalms of Thomas, Book of Thomas the Spiritual Contender or Athlete, Acts of Thomas the Apostle in India, the Syriac Fathers on Prayer and the Spiritual Life, the Letters of John of Deljatha, the Wisdom of St. Isaac of Nineveh, all of these wonderful books, Odes of Solomon, the Hymn of the Pearl, Gnostic and Syriac texts of the East, Mandaean texts, the Mandaean Gnostics of Iraq. Lots of information on books. Email me at this address, james@spiritualawakeningradio.com. Caught up in wonder. In the Gospel of Thomas, it says, "Those who seek should not stop seeking until they find. When they find, they will be disturbed or troubled. When they are troubled, they will be amazed or astonished. Rule over all things and enter into rest." I interpret that verse as referring to different steps and stages of spiritual growth. There is a seeking stage, there is a finding stage, or at least hopefully a finding stage, and then some adjustment, being troubled, being disturbed, a process of the death of the old, the birth of the new, the caterpillar becoming a butterfly. And then there is a stage of astonishment, and this word astonishment, or being caught up in wonder, is often described in the Syriac writings of the East. When this is used in the Syriac literature, being astonished or amazed refers to seeing the divine light appear in one's time of contemplative prayer. Light appears in the darkness and one is astonished. Ruling over all things, this is referring to outranking the stars, outranking this world, outranking this universe. The soul is from above. And so when we connect with our soul, we no longer are a product of evolution and DNA and dust of the cosmos, but something greater, something beyond the foundation of the cosmos. And entering into rest, the destination, divine rest, permanence, tranquility. John of Apamea wrote, and this is found in Sebastian Brock's book, The Syriac Fathers on Prayer and the Spiritual Life, "What wonders has your love effected? When someone is still alive, he has left this world. Though his bodily condition remains with the world's bodily condition, yet his spirit has been raised up towards you, so that for a period of time he is where he knows not, being totally raptured and drawn towards you." Also from Sebastian Brock's book, The Syriac Fathers on Prayer and the Spiritual Life, published by Cistercian Press. "He can be seen by us in the Spirit, even now, if we wish. He is hidden in the loftiness of his hiddenness, in the inaccessible light of his nature, where he lives and reigns over all the extremities of the universe, in the majesty of his dominion, almighty in the power of his word, grasping the round sphere of the earth with all of its inhabitants. Let us therefore tremble at the magnitude of the sight of the ineffable one, and the sound which ceaselessly utters the praise of his hidden being." I want to conclude by sharing some passages from a slightly earlier tradition, the Dead Sea Scrolls. "Yea, lo, on such a creature of clay thou hast shed thy grace, giving him thy commandments in thy good will. Thou hast shaped that clay on the wheel and passed it through thy test, that it may find its way into thy lot. And when cracks appear in it, thou mendest them. Yea, over mere dust hast thou wafted thy Holy Spirit, and hast so molded that clay that it can have converse with angels and be in communion with beings celestial. Your Holy Spirit illuminates the dark places of the heart of your servant with light like the sun. I look to the covenants made by men, worthless. Only your truth shines, and those who love it are wise and walk in the glow of your light. From darkness you raise hearts. Let light shine on your servant. Your light is everlasting. You set your word in this ear of dust and write truths on my heart. You end my wandering to bring me into concordance with you, that I may stand unshaken before you in the glow of perfect light forever, where no darkness is, forever, where unsearchable peace is, forever. For me, a creature of dust. From the fount of his knowledge has my light shot forth. Upon his wonders my eyes have gazed.